Have you ever trusted someone, only to discover they were counting on you, never questioning them? Have you ever sat in a room quiet, respectful, while someone lied to your face because they believed your skin color made you too naive to know better? This isn't just a story about a will. It's about power, legacy, and the quiet rage of being erased. What happens when a family lawyer thinks no one will question his word? What happens when he tries to erase two black siblings from the legacy their parents built with love? And what happens when one of those siblings knows just enough law to shake the entire system? Stay with us, because what unfolds next is not only shocking, it's a reminder that sometimes the people you underestimate the most are the ones who fight the hardest. It was a soft gray morning in Savannah, the kind of day where grief hangs in the air like moss on the oak trees. Marcus and Alana stood side by side at the cemetery, their fingers brushing briefly the only warmth in a world that suddenly felt too cold. Their adoptive parents, Robert and Helen Whitmore, had passed away just weeks apart. A car crash, then a stroke, and now all that was left were fading photos, a worn-out piano, and a house full of memories that didn't quite feel theirs, but still did. Back at the lawyer's office, they sat in silence. The room smelled of stale paper and polished wood. And then he came in, Mr. Brackley, the family lawyer, the man who'd handled every legal matter for the Whitmores for nearly 20 years. He looked over his glasses, tapped the manila envelope in his hand, and said, "Let's get this over with." There was no warmth in his voice, no empathy, just business. He cleared his throat. "I regret to inform you that your parents left no official will, no instructions, which means everything defaults to next of kin." Alana blinked. "But we're their children." Brackley adjusted his tie. "Biologically, no. You were adopted. The estate defaults to Robert's only living relative, his brother in Charleston." Silence. Marcus's jaw clenched. Something didn't feel right. He remembered years ago Robert showing him an envelope sealed with wax tucked into a drawer beneath his Bible. Someday Robert had said, "This will take care of you and your sister." But now that letter was gone. And the man who once spoke of legacy was being silenced by someone who thought he could rewrite the ending. There are days that change your whole life, but they begin in silence. It was a misty morning in Savannah. The sky was a soft, pale gray, as if even time itself was in mourning. Marcus stood beside his sister Alana among the hundreds of quiet gravestones in Whitfield Grove Cemetery. A light breeze passed through the rows of oak trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and faded jasmine from old flower bundles. No one said anything. No one needed to, because everyone was mourning the same thing. Their adoptive parents, Robert and Helen Whitmore, two people who had once opened their arms to two orphaned black children when the world still looked at them with suspicion. Death had come almost all at once. A car accident had taken Robert. Helen passed a few weeks later, as if her heart had broken along with time. Marcus and Alana didn't just lose the ones they loved most. They lost the final pillar in a world that always looked at them like they didn't quite belong. A few days later, they were at the family lawyer's office. The building was old but respectable, tucked behind a row of Victorian-era red brick homes. A polished brass plaque read, "Brackley and Associates, Estate Planning and Probate Law." Marcus remembered that moment clearly, not because anything stood out, but because everything felt empty. Mr. Brackley, the man who used to chat with their parents at Christmas parties, the one who once put a hand on Helen's shoulder when she grieved the loss of her first son, was cold today, like an unsigned contract. He opened the envelope, delicately, decisively. "There's no legal will," he said. "By law, the entire estate will go to Mr. Whitmore's biological brother in Charleston. No condolences, no hesitation. Just there is no will." Alana could barely breathe. Marcus gripped her hand. Neither of them could believe it. But Marcus remembered. He remembered seeing a red, wax-sealed envelope in his father's drawer. He remembered Robert's words, "Marcus, if anything ever happens to your mom and me, this will protect you and Alana." And now, it was gone. No one mentioned it. No sign of it in the file. This wasn't the first time in American history that black children were erased from the story of legacy. In many families, especially within Black and Latinx communities, having no formal will often means assets slip away through a complicated legal system or are claimed by legal next of kin who had never nurtured or loved the deceased. In a 2019 case in Georgia, a woman who had raised her two nieces for 17 years passed away without a will. The house she had spent her life paying off went to a cousin in another state, someone the girls had never even met. Marcus and Alana's story nearly followed the same path. Nearly, until something unexpected happened. Because Mr. Brackley had made a mistake, he didn't realize Marcus wasn't just an unemployed electrician. He had studied law, and he knew exactly where to start. What the lawyer didn't count on was that the Whitmore siblings weren't alone. They had memory, they had truth, and they had trust in each other. And the lie that had just been spoken in that office would become the first breadcrumb in a legal battle no one saw coming. Marcus couldn't forget the way Mr. Brackley said those words. Calm, cold, as if it were just another administrative note in a dry file. I'm sorry, there is no will on record. But how could that make sense? How could two people like Robert and Helen, who were meticulous about everything from dinner receipts to electric bills, not leave behind a single final word for the children they loved more than anything? Marcus looked at Alana. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. This isn't right. And then came the heavy silence. Not because they believed the lawyer, but because they knew something sadder. In the eyes of the system, they had never really been family. In the American legal system, under intestate succession laws, bloodline, not love, is what matters. If someone dies without a will, the estate is passed automatically to biological relatives, parents, siblings, or blood relatives. On paper, that may seem logical, but in reality, it has left countless foster families, especially black families, adopted children, and non-traditional households completely cut out. He lived with his aunt since he was 3, called her mom, and cared for her until the end. But without a will, her house was given to her biological brother in Florida, a man who hadn't visited her once in 30 years. When a reporter asked Darnell how he felt, he simply said, "I don't need the house. I need justice." Back to Marcus. He couldn't sit still. He remembered that old will his father once spoke of. He remembered the whispered promise on a night when the power went out. "Son, always protect your sister. If anything happens to us, you must keep this house." And now, everything was gone. No documents, no proof, no one on their side, just one cold sentence. There is no will, but sometimes a lie that's said too easily reveals something deeper, a crack. When Marcus and Alana walked out of that office, they were no longer the naive kids hoping to be recognized. They carried with them one big question: if there's no will, who made it disappear? And that's where the journey began. They had no evidence, no allies, but they had memory, they had belief. And Marcus had one secret. Mr. Brackley didn't know he had once studied law. What Brackley didn't expect was that Marcus wouldn't just accept a lie as fate, because sometimes the people you think are the weakest are the ones who flip the entire game board with one simple question: can I see a copy of the file? The old house on Cypress Street didn't look like much from the outside. Whitewashed walls faded by the sun, a mossy front porch, and a wooden swing that creaked every time the breeze passed through. But to Marcus and Alana, it was the only place that still held the warmth of their parents. Where they once sat eating cornbread on the porch, listening to their father's war stories, and their mother humming softly in the evenings. The house wasn't big, but it was theirs. It was home. It was proof of a love that didn't need shared blood to be real. And it was there that they decided to start searching for the truth. The small attic on the second floor was rarely visited. It used to be Robert's study. Marcus remembered his father always kept a mahogany chest beside his desk, where he stored important documents and old memories. The chest was still there, but the lock had been changed. He had to use an old pair of pliers from the garage to break it open. Inside were things of no value to lawyers, but priceless to two children desperately seeking the truth. A folder of financial records clearly written in Robert's handwriting. A handwritten draft of a will dated 3 years ago. And an unsent letter. The letter was addressed to Marcus, the handwriting slanted and familiar. "If you're reading this, son, it means your mother and I are no longer with you. But don't ever let anyone tell you that you're not worthy. Everything we have is for you and Alana. This house, this land, and every memory in it. It's yours. Don't let anyone take it from you. Believe in yourself the way we always believed in you. Marcus's hands trembled as he read. Alana sat beside him, tears falling silently onto her sleeve. It wasn't just a letter. It was a piece of their father's soul sent across time and grief. But there was a problem. A handwritten draft of a will is not legally binding without a notary or witnesses. It's a moral proof, not a legal one. And in the eyes of the court, what cannot be proven cannot be kept. Yet it was precisely this that helped Marcus realize a deeper truth. Sometimes the most important thing isn't the paper, it's the memory, because memory leads to questions, and questions lead to the truth. They decided to search for more clues. Marcus went through Robert's old emails on his laptop. Alana called Mrs. Betty, the elderly neighbor who used to watch the house when their parents were away, and then a passing remark from Mrs. Betty made them both freeze. Oh, I remember once. Robert said he was taking some papers to the lawyer's secretary, said he needed to make the will official. That was in June, about 2 years ago. June, 2 years ago. That was exactly when the letter had been written, which meant if a final version existed, it once had been real. Not all truths sit on the surface. Some are buried not because they are weak, but because someone is afraid of what happens when they come to light. Marcus looked at Alana. We need to go back to the law office, he said, not to ask for justice, but to demand what had always been rightfully theirs. And in the confrontation to come, the man who thought he held all the power would soon discover not everyone who stays quiet is incapable of fighting. When Marcus and Alana left the old house with the letter and draft will in hand, one truth became clear. The truth wasn't just hidden. It was buried beneath something even deeper: power. In America, not everyone has an equal chance to defend their legacy. Not every child is recognized by the system, and especially not every skin color is trusted from the beginning. Marcus understood this. He had once studied law. He knew that the U.S. legal system, designed to be fair, often favors those with money connections and social power. In the U.S., if a person dies without a valid will, in-estate succession laws apply. Assets are distributed along a genealogical chart, meaning blood relatives are prioritized. But here's the cruel irony. There is no law in America that requires anyone to leave assets to their adopted children. If there is no clear document properly notarized, witnessed, or filed with the court, children who called someone mom or dad all their lives can be written out of the picture entirely. In 2017, a heartbreaking case in Mississippi made headlines. A black boy named Elijah was raised from infancy by a white couple. They always treated him like their own, but they never legally finalized the adoption. When they died in a car accident, the biological brother, someone they had cut ties with over drug charges, received everything, including the house Elijah had grown up in. He was evicted within 30 days. No one spoke up for him. No lawyer took his case. Marcus had once believed that telling the truth would be enough, but now he knew. To be heard, you must first stand in a place high enough that people cannot ignore you. And for Black Americans, especially in estate disputes, that kind of standing is almost a luxury. Power doesn't just come from what you have. It comes from whether people believe you deserve to have it. Not every battle starts with fists. Some begin with a question, why don't they believe me, even when I have proof? And sometimes the answer isn't in logic, it's in skin color. Marcus knew they needed more than a draft will. They needed undeniable proof. And maybe they needed Mr. Brackley to reveal it himself. Alana looked at him. So what's the next step? Marcus gave a small smile. We're going to get him to say what he tried to hide. Because sometimes you don't need to slam the table. You just need to set the right trap and wait. Marcus had never been the kind of person to talk about himself. Quiet, steady, always the one who listened more than spoke. Alana used to joke, "You're the best secret keeper in the world," even when it's a good secret. But that day, after reading their father's letter and finding the forgotten documents, Alana turned to him and asked Marcus, "What are you going to do?" He paused for a moment, then looked at her and said, "I studied law. 2 years at Morehouse before I had to drop out." Alana was stunned. Marcus had been accepted into the pre-law program at Morehouse College, one of the most prestigious, historically Black universities in the country. He did well, exceptionally well. But in his third year, their adoptive parents had a financial crisis. His scholarship wasn't enough to cover everything. He quietly withdrew, returned home, and worked as an electrician to help the family. No one knew. He had never told anyone. Because to Marcus, titles didn't matter. Responsibility did. And now the knowledge he thought he left behind became the very tool to protect his sister and defend the truth. He researched the process of filing estate claims, looked into destruction or concealment of wills, a civil offense known as breach of fiduciary duty. He started calling the county clerk's office requesting notary records from the past 3 years. Alana looked at him like she was seeing someone new. No longer just the quiet big brother, but a silent warrior slowly flipping the board. In 2021 in Chicago, a young black man named Jamal Turner conducted his own investigation and won a legal case over a disputed inheritance after being cut out of the deed to the house his father had left behind. Jamal had no lawyer, just an old laptop, hundreds of hours reading law, and the determination not to be erased from his own legacy. He gathered evidence, filed the case himself, and stood before the judge on his own, and he won. Marcus was now walking that same road, not because he enjoyed the fight, but because sometimes not fighting means losing everything. When you're underestimated, you have two choices: stay silent or stand up using exactly what they think you don't have knowledge. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand the law, and sometimes you don't need to shout for the truth to echo. Marcus's plan began to take shape. But he knew knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. They needed something stronger, living proof. A lie only truly reveals itself when it's forced to confront what it tried to deny. That's when Marcus and Alana made their next move. They would trap the man who had lied to them. Marcus didn't believe in luck, he believed in logic and evidence. In the subtle moments others overlooked. And most importantly, he believed in contradictions within a liar's story. He and Alana decided to play by Mr. Brackley's rules. No shouting, no lawsuit yet, no direct confrontation. Instead, they created a mirror, a setting that would reflect the truth if someone dared to look into it. Alana called Brackley's office pretending to be a distant relative, asking to confirm inheritance details. She requested a private meeting, saying she had additional information about the will and wanted to make sure the right person was receiving it. They hid a tiny recorder in her purse, set their phone to record the call, and sat once again in the same familiar seats of that old wood-paneled office. At first, Mr. Brackley was cautious, professional face, even tone. But when Alana dropped a gentle trap, my father once mentioned, having notarized a new will. Are you sure there's nothing like that in the system? Brackley hesitated for just half a second. Just half a second, but Marcus caught it. The man's eyes darted briefly toward the file shelf. His hand clenched his pen slightly. I suppose, Mr. Robert may have intended to draft one but never completed it. If there were such a will, I would certainly be aware of it. But they knew he was lying, because under Georgia law, all notarized records are duplicated and filed with the county clerk's office. And Marcus had requested a search days earlier, a few days later. A call from Brackley's former secretary changed everything. Her name was Marlene, a middle-aged woman who had left the office 6 months ago. I don't want to be involved in anything, but I remember clearly. Mr. Robert came in. I personally filed that will into the safe. It had a notary seal. I swear it. Marlene agreed to sign an affidavit. And more importantly, she had a scanned copy in her personal email, sent from the law office's internal account. Subject line: Final Will, Whitmore Estate. Marcus could barely speak, not from surprise, but from the overwhelming relief of finally seeing the truth emerge from behind the veil of deceit. In 2018 in Texas, an inheritance case reversed course because of a single email from a former law firm assistant. She discovered the lead attorney had deliberately excluded a will to favor his loyal client. The email and attached file turned the case upside down. The attorney was disbarred and the rightful heir recovered the estate after 18 months of fighting. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be documented in the right place, at the right time, by the right person, with the evidence in hand. Marcus and Alana knew they didn't just have a chance, they had a reason to go to court. They were no longer two kids sitting in silence while others decided their future. They were witnesses. They were the holders of truth, and most importantly, they represented everyone who had ever been erased from the family story simply because they didn't have a certificate of bloodline. The courtroom was waiting, and Mr. Brackley had no idea he was walking into a trial he would never forget. The courtroom wasn't crowded that day. Just a few seats filled a handful of court staff. Some curious relatives and the two siblings, standing side by side, hands tightly clasped. Marcus wore an old, freshly ironed shirt. Alana had braided her hair, not out of formality, but because their mother once said, "When you enter a sacred space, you walk in like you know you matter." They didn't bring expensive lawyers, just evidence. And the truth, the judge was a white woman around 60. Her voice was steady, her eyes fair. She listened as if every word mattered, and Marcus knew if truth was to be heard clearly anywhere, it was here. Mr. Brackley entered, as always, composed, confident, with a slightly arrogant smile. He didn't know that his game had ended before it began. Marcus submitted the printed email from Marlene, the scanned will with notary seal clear date, and the subject line final will, Whitmore Estate. The court verified that this document had never been submitted to the county's official record. "Why was this not reported by your office?" the judge asked Mr. Brackley hesitated. Sweat began to form at his temples. I can't recall every file. My office may have made a clerical error. But when Marlene took the stand, she was clear. I was instructed to put that document into a separate drawer. And forget it. I couldn't stay silent while those children were being robbed in plain sight. The room grew heavy. Every eye turned toward Mr. Brackley. The man who had once said, "There is no will," was now surrounded by the very thing he tried to bury. In many U.S. states, deliberately concealing or destroying a notarized will is a serious offense. It can lead to disbarment, civil prosecution, even criminal charges if intent to defraud is proven, especially when the victim is a rightful heir without the means to fight back. Courts consider it a form of legal abuse of power. In 2016 in Florida, a lawyer was caught hiding a valid will to divert the estate to another client who had promised him a cut. When exposed, he was permanently disbarred, and the real heir restored after 3 years of litigation. Marcus didn't need to raise his voice. Truth, when presented fully, speaks for itself. The judge struck the gavel. The court recognizes the submitted will as valid inheritance. Rights are granted to Marcus and Alana Whitmore. Brackley Law Office will be investigated for ethical misconduct. The courtroom fell silent. Then Alana burst into tears, not because they had won, but because finally, their parents' voices, though long gone, had been heard. Truth doesn't need to be louder. It just needs not to give up. But the story didn't end there. Marcus and Alana walked out of the courthouse as the late afternoon sun filtered through the old stone steps. In their hands was a legal decision, but in their hearts was something far greater than ownership. It was the belief that no one could erase you from your own story unless you let them. And then Alana looked at Marcus and whispered, "Do you think we should share this story for others out there like us?" Marcus just nodded, because sometimes personal justice is the beginning of community justice. That afternoon, Marcus and Alana left the courthouse holding a copy of the ruling. The wind was light. The sky was clear, but no one shook their hands. No one apologized. There were no words from Mr. Brackley, no email, not even a glance of remorse. And that, more than the trial itself, was what stung Alana the most. Justice had arrived, but it hadn't come with recognition. No one in the system who had stayed silent when they needed help came forward to say, "We were wrong." In America, and in many parts of the world, the legal system can return your property, your status, or your rights, but it rarely returns the feelings that were hurt. Justice by law is fairness determined by procedure. But human dignity, trust, honor, memory can't be repaid with a court ruling. Marcus had once believed that when they won, someone would stand up and admit fault, that Mr. Brackley would say, "I'm sorry." But no, he just bowed his head, walked away, and disappeared into the cold marble hallway of the courthouse, leaving behind two people who hadn't lost but hadn't completely won either. The famous Central Park 5 case is a powerful example. 5 young Black and Latino boys were wrongfully convicted of assault and rape in 1989. They spent years in prison before DNA evidence proved their innocence. They were awarded $41 million in compensation. But in an interview, one of them said, "We got the money, but we never got a real apology." Marcus understood that deeply. Justice might return the house, but it couldn't erase that night when two siblings sat silently believing they didn't count as children in the very family that raised them. It couldn't erase society's silence when their skin color became an unspoken excuse to exclude them. Justice that arrives late often doesn't come with an apology, only a chance to move forward. Don't wait for someone to apologize before believing you deserve respect. Marcus and Alana weren't seeking forgiveness. They weren't waiting for remorse. They simply chose not to stay silent anymore. And from their own story, they decided to do the one thing they wish someone had done for them: help others learn how to protect their legacy. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning a new journey, the journey of sharing, educating, awakening their community. When the storm passes, what's left behind isn't always anger. Sometimes it's a lesson. Marcus and Alana understood that. They may not have been fully prepared legally when their parents died, but they swore they would not let other families fall into the same darkness. If our parents' people, so loving and careful, could still be erased by the system, how many others out there will suffer worse? Marcus said during their first community meeting at the old family church. Marcus began organizing free sessions for families in their neighborhood, where he explained in the simplest terms the most important truths about inheritance. Always create a notarized will. Handwritten wills aren't enough, except in a few states that accept holographic wills under strict conditions. A valid will must be signed by witnesses, notarized, and stored securely. Talk openly about assets and intentions. Avoid family secrets. Let your children know what your plans are, who gets what and why. Transparency doesn't just prevent disputes. It builds trust across generations. Regularly update legal documents. Don't let an outdated will be used as an excuse to ignore the current one. Every major life event, marriage, childbirth, divorce, property purchase, should trigger an update. Store copies in multiple safe places. Marcus recommended keeping one copy with a lawyer, one with the heir, and one in a secure digital archive with encryption. In Baltimore, a nonprofit program called Free Wills helped over 2,000 Black families draft valid wills in just 3 years simply through free community workshops and clear guidance. Because of that, dozens of families were able to keep their ancestral properties when loved ones passed away instead of fighting in silence or being forced out of their own homes. No one invited Marcus and Alana to be keynote speakers. They didn't have academic titles, but they had something more important: lived experience and hearts that couldn't bear to watch others suffer as they had. Alana started a personal blog to share every step they took. Marcus recorded video guides about drafting wills, checking notarization records, and knowing adoptive children's legal rights. You don't need a law degree to protect what's right. You just need someone who cares enough to show you the way. A legacy doesn't begin with property. It begins with preparation. Those lessons didn't come from textbooks. They came from pain, from courtroom silence, and from a letter written by a father that no one else believed was real. But from those ashes, Marcus and Alana found something greater than justice. They found purpose. And sometimes, as Marcus once said, you don't always get to choose the story that happens to you, but you always get to choose how you tell it, so others don't repeat the same tragedy. At first, Marcus and Alana just wanted to keep the house. They thought this fight was about a will, a property, a denied inheritance. But in the end, they realized this was never just about a will. It was about value, about how society recognizes the existence of people like them. Black adopted individuals who don't fit into the standard bloodline chart. It was about dignity, about being acknowledged as a legitimate, rightful part of the story they had lived with all their heart. It was about voice, about refusing to stay silent when someone tries to rewrite the past with the pen of power and prejudice. In America, thousands of families, especially in communities of color and among minorities, lose their inheritance not because there's nothing left to pass on, but because no one helped them keep it. A legal system built on paperwork and privilege often unintentionally forgets those who don't know how or cannot afford to play by the rules. And in that silence, too many legacies are lost. Not just homes or land, but the sense of belonging. In 2022, a young African-American woman named Nadia in North Carolina lost her father, a veteran, without a will. Her cousin took full control of the entire estate. though she had lived with her father for 23 years. She inherited nothing. No one helped. No one explained the system, and the case never made it to court. That story wasn't in the news because no one documented it, just like thousands of other stories swallowed by silence and legal complexity. That's why Marcus and Alana's fight still continues. Not in court, but in every small conversation. Every email sent to share what they've learned. Every family they help write their first will. We can't change the whole system, but if we can help one family, just one, avoid the road we had to walk, then every bit of pain was worth it. Truth doesn't have to win in silence. It needs to be told so others don't have to fight alone. If you're watching this video, maybe you don't think you'll ever need a will. Maybe you believe you're still young, or everything's already understood in your family. But the truth is, what's understood doesn't always get respected. Prepare, share this story. Help someone you love understand. The right to belong should not be something you have to fight for. And if you've ever been overlooked, ever been dismissed, ever felt like your voice didn't matter, remember this: you're not alone. And sometimes, one person standing up like Marcus did is enough to change many other lives. That person was me. And if you saw yourself somewhere in this story, tell it again, because the world needs your voice. If this story made you think, or if you saw someone you love reflected in it, leave us a comment below. We read every one of your words, and don't forget to like and subscribe to That Person Was Me, so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world.